There it is. There's the celebrations. Have a look at this. They're going berserk in the middle. 800 days from a time.
Full toss in the air. This is going to be over the top. Yes, over the top for six. He smashed him away for six. These Sri Lankans are giving the Aussies a real hiding.
He's bald. I thought he got the bat had been before.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Armchair Critics podcast with me, Damith, and a little bit of Andrew. The working title for this episode is Everything Uber Awesome About Mahela. So you may guess that this is an episode dedicated entirely to Mahela Jayawardene and his retirement. Mahela, obviously a colossal in Sri Lankan cricket, the undisputed people's champion. And if you think about it, Mahela's story has had an amazing arc. A child prodigy who became one of the finest batsmen in the world, captained his nation, and not just a token captain either, someone who pushed the boundaries of captaincy, certainly as far as Sri Lanka has seen and is likely to see for a long time, and ultimately becoming the people's champion. So obviously there's obviously been a lot of things written about all of this in recent times, but at the Armchair Critics we wanted to sort of take a step back and absorb all of those things that have been said and try to paint a picture of Mahela, from his beginnings in the national team to the time in the leadership role and sort of how he was perceived in different parts of the world, and ultimately with regards to what sort of legacy he's left behind. To do this, of course, it wasn't something that me or Andrew could have done by ourselves. So I've been talking to a number of different people, including Tom Moody, Sri Lanka's former coach, Dav Whatmore, former two-time Sri Lanka coach, Jarrod Kimber from Cricinfo and Polite Inquiries and the Two Chucks and cricketwithballs.com, a good friend of the podcast as well, Lawrence Booth, the editor of the Wisden Cricketers Almanac, Dileep Premachandran, the editor of Wisden India, and also former Sri Lankan Test cricketer Russel Arnold. So we'll be bringing you little snippets of those conversations as the show progresses. But to begin with, I spoke to Andrew Fernando, Sri Lanka's Cricinfo correspondent, who was actually there at the ground on that final day at the SSC, Mahela's beloved SSC, and to talk about how everything sort of panned out on the day from where he was sitting.
He's one of these cricketers that really sort of people felt an affinity with. I think they do with Sangha as well, but Sangha's more like the Sri Lankan ambassador overseas, whereas Mahela's the guy that people really relate to, and he is just a very relatable person, very approachable, and it was really nice to see at the SSC actually after he had finished and he had done his victory lap. They let all the people who had stayed around, a few thousand people to come in and crowd around him at the presentation area, and I thought that was really nice, something that I hadn't seen in Sri Lankan cricket, and it was just good because he's just always someone who takes time to appreciate his fans and to spend time and give something back to the people that support him, and you can tell that it means a lot to him to have played with those big home crowds, to have played for Sri Lanka basically, and the farewell was pretty perfect really, especially on the fourth and fifth day. A big crowd turned up. So it was also great to see the institutions that Mahela has been part of come together and celebrate him at the SSC. I'm talking about Nalanda College and the SSC as well. Institutions that meant a lot to him and had a lot to do with him being the player that he was. He probably had more guards of honor than showers than he's had in the last year. And all throughout he was pretty joyful. There were a couple of times when it looked like he was just about to break into tears, but then just pulled it back. And he was joking with the journalists and stuff afterwards, and I think he left, with a lot of contentment and pride of what he'd been able to achieve and what the team had been able to achieve while he was there. So in many ways, it felt like a good farewell, and it felt like a happy occasion, which is as much as you can ask for.
So Andrew touched on it slightly then about how Mahela was such a hugely popular cricketer, and this is obviously true in Sri Lanka. I mean, you saw the fan turnout in both Galle and the SSC, something you rarely see in Test cricket in Sri Lanka, crowds at grounds. But we've also seen the Gypsies write a song about him, and there were these amazing pictures of journalists getting the accreditation tag signed by Mahela. But I thought, so obviously he was massively popular in Sri Lanka, but I thought it might be interesting to see how the rest of the world, perceived Mahela. So here's Lawrence Booth, Jarrod Kimber, and Dileep Premachandran sharing their views on that.
The perception of Jayawardene in England is of a sort of understated, impressive guy. He was very popular here. He did have a hard edge, Jayawardene. There was a press conference at Headingley earlier this year when Sri Lanka won that game. It was on the fourth evening. They hadn't wrapped things up yet, but they only needed 5 wickets, which they just about managed the next day. And Jayawardene came out and didn't need much invitation, really, to point out that England hadn't responded well to the pressure. And he seemed to enjoy that role as senior statesman who was speaking on behalf of the team and embodying, if you like, the sense of fight and spirit within the Sri Lankan side. So I think he could be a feisty character, but sort of a gentle guy generally, played the game in the right spirit, and was greatly admired in England. It's hard not to admire a man with well over 11,000 Test runs.
In England, he's thought of as this sort of cherub-faced, nice little guy who bats very pretty, which probably it isn't really fair to him, to be fair. He's a lot tougher than that and a lot better than that. And in Australia, I think they've seen the fiery side of Mahela, so they probably respect him. But let's be honest, Sri Lankan cricketers, they don't get the credit they deserve pretty much right throughout the world. And that's no different in Australia and England than most other places. So he doesn't have the respect that someone of his skill should have.
I think Mahela has always been deeply respected by Indian players, whether that's the current generation or the so-called golden generation that went before. Whoever you talk to had only good things to say about him as a player on the field, and more importantly as an individual off it. A lot of them had a lot of time for him off the field because he really is a lovely guy. As for the public, I think there was initially a perception that he was a guy who could perform only in home conditions, in favourable conditions. But as the years have gone on and they've watched him play more in England, in Australia, in South Africa, and across the world really, that perception has changed a little bit. I still think some people feel that he's more suited to subcontinent pitches rather than overseas, but I think with time and with the sheer amount of runs that he's made, that perception has slowly changed.
So Mahela is, of course, first and foremost a batsman, and obviously over the years he's racked up close to 25,000 runs across all formats of the game. So let's now hear a little bit from Lawrence Booth about where he thinks Mahela's batting ranks, and what he thought of Mahela's batting, and also from Jarrod for his own unique view of how he saw Mahela's batting. And from Dileep Premachandran about his most memorable innings by Mahela, as well as what he was feeling as an Indian when Mahela was scoring that amazing one-day 100 in the 2011 World Cup final against India.
I think Mahela Jayawardene will rank as one of the all-time greats. I have the feeling that he didn't always get the credit he deserved. I don't know if that was because he came from a country that didn't rank as one of cricket's superpowers, if you like. I suspect if he'd been Indian, English or Australian, he would have been held in even higher esteem than he already is. But look at his records. He finished 7th on the all-time list of leading run scorers in Test cricket, averaging a fraction under 50, which is an astounding effort, really. He slotted in between Brian Lara and Shivnaren Chanderpaul. His good friend Kumar Sangakkara just above him, and in all formats in international cricket he scored a tick under 25,000 runs. So that's an astonishing effort for in a team where Murali would carried the bowling for many years. Rangana Herath has done very well since then, but in the batting it's often mainly been Mahela Jayawardene and Kumar Sangakkara. So the two of them seem to have fed off each other. They seem to have derived strength from their sense of responsibility in the team, and it's hard to overstate really just how much Sri Lanka will miss him. I think what made him so special was his ability just to keep the scoreboard ticking over, sometimes without you noticing. He'd bat in second gear a lot of the time. I remember England watching him in despair at times, especially when England went to tour Sri Lanka. He'd rack up the 150s, the double hundreds, almost without people noticing. And I mean that as a compliment. He was a lovely batsman to watch because he was so elegant and effortless, but that was part of the beguiling nature of the way he played. You'd never feel like you were being destroyed by Jayawardene. You were kind of eased into submission, gently strangulated. He had lovely shots all around the wicket, but he'd stay in second gear. I spoke to Ian Bell once, I remember, and I asked him which batsman he'd like to model himself on. This was at a time when Bell was an elegant player but wasn't producing big scores in tough situations, and he mentioned Mahela Jayawardene precisely for that reason, because Jayawardene never felt the need to move through the gears just for show. He'd assess a match situation brilliantly. A couple of situations where against England, when England went there in 2012 and Jayawardene scored 180 at Galle, which was a terrific innings. He survived a couple of chances to Monty Panesar near the end of the innings, but he timed that brilliantly. Sri Lanka had been in trouble in both innings there early on against Jimmy Anderson, but Jayawardene held things together, and then in the next test at the Pisara in Colombo, he made 105. Now England went on to win that game, but they knew that the victory wasn't in their grasp until they got Jayawardene out. He was that kind of a player. I'm looking at his overall record over the years. He scored most of his Test hundred, or the greatest number of his Test hundreds against England. Eight of his 3400s came against England, which was more than against any other nation, and he averaged 58 against them overall. Now his record in England wasn't so great, averaging 35. I think at times he struggled a little against the moving ball and the bouncing ball, but in Sri Lanka against England he was almost unmovable. I remember a tour at the end of 2007 when England went there, and he made 195 and 213 not out in successive innings, and England simply didn't know where to bowl to him. They were just praying for a mistake.
What made him a special batsman is that he sort of had the natural gift of batting. You know, there's a lot of other cricketers, I suppose. There's a few others that come to mind. They're a bit more man-made. They have to put the stuff together themselves. They have to do the extra hours and you know, they have to work on their game. Whereas what was great about Mahela was he didn't really matter where you saw him batting, in what situation, for what team, or in any way. He was just batting, and it was just pure, and it was beautiful to watch. It's very hard to know where we rank him because, you know, we've had flat pitches for a long time, so a lot of people are going to have slightly inflated averages. We now, although it's not as much a problem with Sri Lanka, we now have, you know, some of the other teams playing so much cricket that their players they've just never played as much cricket as they have, so that the bowlers are getting tired. So you put that together with the bigger bats and the shorter boundaries and etc., etc. But regardless of that, he has to go down and will go down as one of the all-time great batsmen, and probably, hopefully, he'll go down as one of the great batsmen to watch. You know, for whatever reason, BVF Laxman probably has taken that one a little bit more away from him. But yeah, naked in a birdcage, you'll take either man. There was no special knock that made me fall in love with him. There was no knock that made me think he was amazing. There was no knock that changed my opinion of him, because, I mean, from the first time I ever saw him, he was just a quality batsman. And it was quite clear, you know, I don't know what I saw him make at that first time, but I think it wasn't that many runs. But it was just quite clear that he was a classy batsman. He was going to be around for a very long time. And so for me, it's all the innings altogether. He hasn't made a particular innings that you know, that sticks in my mind, but he's just so good so often. And, you know, it doesn't matter if you turn on the TV late at night and there's an IPL game on, or, you know, if you're early in the morning and you get up and you're having some breakfast and he's batting in the UAE, he's just always good, isn't he? He's good. He's really good, you know. I mean, let's be honest. He's pretty. It looks great. It smells great. You know, basically, you want to eat his innings.
I think the one Mahela innings that will always stand out for me is the 100 he made at Lords in 2006. Sri Lanka was so far behind on first innings. I think it was 370 something, and asked to follow on. He made 119, but more importantly, the way he batted with the tail, the way he coaxed performances out of players like Kulasekara and Vas, and it was just done in a completely unhurried, unflustered sort of way. I mean, you wouldn't think that they had been a million runs behind and were fighting to save the game. It was just such an unhurried, collected innings. And I think that was when I first thought to myself, this really is one of the greats at work. When he was playing that innings, my first thought was that, there's no way India are going to win this match now, because, you look at the history of World Cup finals and how they've panned out. Typically, if a team bats first and puts a good score on the board, that's it. And in those conditions, 274 was an excellent total. It really was. I think you have to give some credit for the way India batted that night. Gambhir and Dhoni played out of their skins to get India to that target. But at the time when Mahela scored that 100, which is one of the most special innings you'll ever see in a World Cup, at that time I really didn't think India had a sniff.
For many Sri Lankan cricket fans, their love affair with cricket really began when Sri Lanka won that 1996 World Cup. It sort of heralded the birth of modern Sri Lankan cricket, with people like Arjun Ranatunga and Arvind De Silva, and that entire 1996 World Cup squad sort of taking Sri Lankan cricket from being semi-professional to catapulting it into the world's eye. And Mahela Jayawardene slowly started his career in the midst of all that amazing change that was happening in Sri Lankan cricket. And we know now that he would later go on to lead Sri Lanka with high distinction across all formats of the game. But what was evident from my conversations with Tom Moody and Dav Whatmore was that Jayawardene was always destined for this sort of greatness because of the sort of character he was. And sort of way he viewed the game from such an early age, and also when he eventually did take over the Test captaincy under Tom Moody as coach, that he had a clear vision about where he wanted to take Sri Lankan cricket, and that he wanted to be the one transform Sri Lankan cricket from the change that happened in '96 to making even a greater transformation of Sri Lankan cricket that would take it into a completely different level. So here are those conversations with Tom Moody and Dav Whatmore. What were your first impressions? Because I think when you came back for the second time, Mahela was already in the side for a couple of years. What sort of impression did you have of him?
Yeah, no, he was a youngster then, as you know, and just the odd conversation you had, there was a very strong indication that he was a real deep thinker. He would talk about playing the outside half of the ball for outswingers and, stuff like that. And I think, Jesus, this guy's really bloody, he's fine focusing on, on strategies and that sort of thing at that young age. So it was pretty evident to me, at that early age that he had he was thinking deeper than most would at that age. In team meetings, he'd be very quiet, but when he did say anything, it was of real substance. So he would always think before he'd make comments, and you could always bet your bottom dollar that what he's saying makes sense.
And what do you think Sri Lanka will miss most about not having Mahela in that Test lineup?
Yeah, obviously you're going to miss those runs.
Yeah.
Number two, the area which is very hard to define and measure is the dressing room atmosphere. When you have an experienced player, you automatically, others feel a little bit calmer because of his presence. When you take that experience out of that dressing room, then, it's still the same dressing room. There's still 15 people in there, but it's that feeling, it's that, it's difficult to measure, but that experience is gone, and you will feel that sort of difference. So with that gone, that's something that you'll miss. And also, obviously, his ability to mentor and guide decisions that have to be made on very short notice when you're in the field, rather than when it's your turn to bat. When it's the batting team, you've got a little bit of time to make decisions through a democratic process. But when you're on the field, you've got to make decisions quick, and he's always there to lend a hand to ensure that decisions are made are correct ones.
So with regards to captaincy, I mean, Mahela, I believe, took over the Sri Lankan captaincy for the Test captaincy first under when you were coach. I believe he was already the one day captain when he was around. So can you tell us a little bit about those early years? I mean, did he always have a vision for how he wanted the side to play? It will be really good if you could get some views on that.
Yeah, I think that firstly and most importantly, Mahela is a natural leader. So captaincy was something that came to him very easily. He naturally has those leadership instincts and caring instincts, which are important with regards to leadership. I believe he was warmed to captaincy immediately because he cared about individuals, he cared about the team, and wanted the team to develop and learn constantly and strive to improve.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in terms of getting that vision across, how did he work with you, and what sort of things did you guys try to implement within the team with Mahela's driving force?
Yeah, look, we worked obviously very closely, and our bond was inseparable, really. Which all good coach-captain relationships are like that. With Mahela, it was a very easy relationship to form, mm-hmm. and what was important to us was the brand of cricket we played and the type of improvements we wanted. One of the important things to us in the early times was not only being a successful team at home in Sri Lanka, but being a team that took on challenges overseas and were prepared to embrace the challenges overseas against still threatened against challenges from overseas, which has happened in the past.
Yeah. So just staying on the captaincy theme there. So obviously when we talk about Mahela's captaincy, we always say that he was a very positive and strategic captain. Yes. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, why was he special? What made him different to other captains with regards to strategy and just managing the on-field play?
Well, Mahela by nature is a winner. So from the time that the coin is tossed, he's looking to win the game. He's thinking about how to constantly win battles within the game, whether that be to take the very next wicket or win the session of play or win the day of play, against being a captain that would sit in the game and wait for the game to unfold and hopefully be in a position to be able to strike as the game has unfolded. So Mahela was someone that was hungry and extremely competitive to get the results in any situation.
So what we're finding out from all these conversations is that Mahela was an excellent leader, regardless of whether you agree or not about his tactical knowledge and skill levels as a captain. What is evident is that he was a natural leader, and I thought it would be interesting to hear about somebody who actually played under Mahela, who's Russel Arnold, who played a little bit of his cricket under Mahela. So I thought it'll be interesting to talk to Russel about what it was like playing under Mahela as captain. Then I also spoke to Dileep about different sorts of challenges that an Asian captain faces, and also got Jarrod's thoughts on what he actually thought about Mahela's captaincy, as well as the sort of managerial role he's had to play with, so much of off-field drama happening with the cricket board as well, which is not a challenge that a lot of other captains have to face. So here are the snippets of those conversations. Yep. So which sort of leads me into my next question. Obviously, when you talk about Mahela, the captain, we talk about how what a great tactician he was, what a great strategist he was, and what a leader who sort of led from the front was. You played a little bit of your cricket, one-day cricket under him. Around that time of your career, when Mahela took over the job and when you played under him, what do you when you played under him, what did you see that sort of set him apart from other captains? Maybe you could draw on some personal experiences there.
Well, the way he went about his things, even senior players such as Mahela Jayawardene did rely or did have respect for Mahela, which was good to see, even with the age gap. The Sri Lankan culture where if you're older, you do tend to gain more respect. But that was not the case here. Mahela was able to get the best out of all the players because he could understand, he could relate to most of them. Some players, the very best of them, probably do not know what the average player goes through. The average player, you find most of them around. So the very good player, they look after themselves, they perform anyway, and only very few of them are around. So when you come to a team, it's about taking along another 6 or 7 guys with you. He was able to do that really well. Initially, his plans were about the team and then how he could fit in and help. But some other captains that I've seen, initially they fit themselves in and then make the team plans around them. So that also set Mahela apart.
I think he was an outstanding captain, especially while captaining Murali. I know that's a big gift to have a player like that in your arsenal. But I think the way he managed Murali, the kind of fields he set for him, there's always been a tendency in recent times with captains from the subcontinent to try and go on the defensive and almost bore out wickets, which works in certain conditions, but which can make you look quite clueless in others. I don't think Mahela was ever like that. In a sense, I'd compare him to Rahul Dravid because he always tried to make things happen. He had confidence in his spin bowlers and the fields he set, the way he approached the other side's batting innings. It wasn't like, okay, our goal is just to restrict these guys and then see how much we can make. It was like, let's see how we can go out and take 10 wickets. I thought he was a very good tactician, one of the better ones definitely that we've seen in Asian cricket in the past couple of decades.
He's definitely an instinctive cricketer, so that goes into his captaincy. He understands the game very well. And one of the things I think he really does well, Mahela, is he just has an idea of where the batsman is wanting to play the ball. And that, being that half a step ahead of someone is really good. Look, I don't think he's a great captain. I think he was a good captain, a very good captain. But to be honest, in modern cricket, being a very good captain, sometimes makes you a great, because you are up against so many people who aren't that good. So he's definitely one of the best captains of the modern era. I don't know where he goes in the all-time list, but he is a very talented leader. Yeah, Mahela, the manager, is an important one because we all know how much Mahela absolutely hates virtually every part of the SLC and having to deal with them and having to front up for them. And, he's not always been that shy about telling it. And look, SLC is, a horrible, it's vomit, essentially. So having someone like him who's strong-willed, and can make the runs he has. It's very important because if you take him and Kumar out and you think about what basically the SLC would have been able to run roughshod right over the top of those players over and over again. So having two strong people like that, and Mahela especially because he got so angry and they didn't want, the one thing that you can do with cricket boards is you can embarrass them, and he did embarrass them a couple of times, and so they had to occasionally listen to him. And so without him, Sri Lankan cricketers would have been they just would have been treated horribly. So, he's a very important part of Sri Lankan cricket in that sense.
And we thought we'd finish off the show by talking to our guests on the show today about what is what is the legacy that Mahela leaves behind, as well as what will Sri Lanka really miss about not having Mahela around?
The calmness, the tactical knowledge, the motivational factors that he would bring into any youngster and to any team, even to the senior players. He's always on the ball, and Sri Lanka have rarely had teams that can go on and dominate the world like that of the Australians or the West Indies teams of the past. But they've been very competitive, and they've always been a handful wherever. That's because tactically Sri Lanka have been a step ahead, and Mahela Jayawardene is one of those who spots these little things which give you an extra edge and make sure that the team performs to their strength, using these tactical know-how. For example, different players being used at different times, the way the bowling is rotated, the fields that are set, which time to attack. I think when you look at all the teams around, Sri Lanka are far ahead. So now with Mahela gone, that aspect will be missing, and also guiding the youngsters through, giving them the motivational factors or educating them on these tactical aspects, how to handle pressure, those type of things will be a very big miss.
What do you think is the legacy that Mahela has left behind for Sri Lanka and also world cricket, in your opinion?
I think one thing that Mahela has left behind is that he is a great educator, and I think you can see that in what he's left behind with the likes of Angelo Nantes. He cares about individuals, and he cares about the progress of individuals and his team. He's generous with his sharing of his knowledge, and he cares about people's progress and development in the game.
In terms of the legacy Mahela has left behind, well, I hope that not all young Sri Lankan cricketers now want to be an off-spinner, as may have been the case when Murali was at his peak. Perhaps they now look at Jayawardene and Sangakkara and think that tough middle-order runs at 3 and 4 are something to aspire to as well. He helped keep Sri Lankan cricket on the map. The process that began with Ranatunga, then the '96 World Cup win. Murali took it forward, and Jayawardene and Sangakkara, with a bit of help from Jayasuriya and Dilshan along the way, have been the guys who have cemented Sri Lanka's status as a impressive nation, really. And he's bowed out with a Test win against Pakistan. He ticked off a Test series win in England this year, and very little left that he had to achieve. We'll miss him greatly.
And that's it. That's the Mahela Tribute podcast. I've really had a great time talking to all these guys about Mahela and what he's meant to most of these people. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to those little snippets of conversations I've had with these journalists and former cricketers and former coaches as well. So thanks for listening, guys. And as a reward for listening all the way to the end, I've got a couple of blooper outros. I asked Jarrod what he thought might be Mahela's most interesting non-cricketing fact, and he had a pretty hilarious answer as usual. And here's Dav Whatmore talking about Mahela being really, really annoying in the way he supports Manchester United. So we hope you enjoy that, and we'll catch you on the next podcast. Thanks for listening again. This has been Damith and a little bit of Andrew on the Armchair Critics on islandcricket.lk. Thanks. Bye-bye.
The problem with him, Mahela, he barracks for bloody Manchester United, and he's and they're so good, they're pain in the ass when he talks about them.
I've got no great stories, but I suppose the most interesting thing I always found about Mahela was that this relationship with his wife, and his wife's quite commanding. And, you've been around, team environments and hotel environments, and she's very much the general of his life. And you get the feeling she points here and he runs here, and she asks for this and he does this, and she does it with other people as well. So it's quite interesting. On the field, he's a bit more combative and he's the leader, because in his own life, it often seems like she's the star. She's the one that cameras are on. She's the one that wants the attention, where he's just the guy that enjoys batting and, likes being with the team. So, I suppose that's the most interesting thing that I've seen.